forward, and the very fact that we would be a new government would help. I think actually we do have a lot of experience in the party, and I think that, for instance, with David Cameron as Prime Minister and William Hague as Foreign Secretary, you'd see an enormous leap, if you like, in authority across the world. I think we'd probably beef up our embassies a bit in the sense of entrusting them more with the reputation of Britain in the country they're serving. In broader terms, too, we're going to have a defence review, so there are going to be some big foreign policy implications on that. So there's going to be a lot of fresh thought and fresh faces, but very intelligent and competent people will be in those jobs.
Intelligent and competent people who perhaps advocate peace rather than the clash that we've seen over the last decade. Would you say the world has become any safer after 9/11? I mean, the war on terror seems to have fueled further hatred around the world.
Yes, I mean, I think probably it's fair to say that George Bush and the way he labelled people, you know, as the axis of evil and things like that, perhaps made the world a more dangerous place when at the beginning of the century, the millennium, it looked as though a lot of the old conflicts had been settled and that we could start the millennium with a mood of optimism. So I think that nothing in global affairs is ever solved forever. And you can only take gradual steps to try and make things better. But I think we can take some big gradual steps over the years ahead, particularly in the nearer Middle East. I mean, I think we're going to get, you know, depending on what happens in Iran, I think there are opportunities now to talk to Syria much more constructively, and that is important, I think, as an ingredient for a solution between Palestine and Israel. So, you know, there are, I think, better prospects than we've had for some time.
Because what happens around the world obviously has an impact on what happens in London, and that is why we're talking about the international dimension. But viewers, we are talking to Alan Duncan, Member of Parliament, who is, of course, the leader, the shadow leader of the House of the Conservative Party here we are in the British Parliament. We'll take a short break. When you come back, we'll talk more about British politics and also more about democracy in Pakistan and the Muslim world after this very short break. Welcome back, viewers, to Insight with Javed Malik on this special program here from the British Parliament. As you know, we are talking to Alan Duncan, Member of Parliament. He's, of course, the shadow leader of the House. And for those of the viewers who may not know what a shadow leader of the House does, in Britain we have the government, and we also have a government in waiting, which is called sometimes the shadow government. And of course, just like we have a leader of the House, they also have a shadow leader of the House. And today we're talking to him. We're here in British Parliament in a very historic room, which Mr. Duncan will tell us more about. We'll talk about the international dimensions as well as Pakistan and Britain. Mr. Duncan, Mr. Alan Duncan, what would be the role of a shadow leader of the House in the British political system?
The House of Commons has to pass legislation, it has rules of debate and all these things. The leader of the House and the shadow leader of the House are the people who are, if you like, the managing directors of the place to make sure that the legislation comes through and that the rules are followed and all that kind of thing. So we basically run the mechanics. We are the business managers of the House of Commons. And even as a shadow leader, I'm involved in chairing some of the senior committees which make up the rules.
Now, for many sort of developing democracies, it may be of interest to know more about the shadow government. What is the benefit of having a shadow government or a government in waiting? How do you keep the government in check by having this? Because in many democracies we don't really have that.
In Britain, we basically have a system in Parliament where you're for something or against it. That's why we face each other in the chamber and we vote aye or no, yes or no. And the leader of the majority party in Parliament is the Prime Minister, at the moment Labour. At any time there could be a general election, a maximum of 5 years from the last one, but otherwise whenever the Prime Minister calls one. And that means that we've always got to be ready, in the hope that we win, to take their place. So if they have got a Foreign Secretary, we've got a shadow Foreign Secretary. If they've got a Chancellor of the Exchequer, we've got the shadow Chancellor. So for every person they've got in the government team, we've got someone opposite and facing them, we hope, to replace them. But it also means, in the meantime, you keep an eye on them and ask them difficult questions and scrutinize them. So that equal and opposite structure is the crucial structure of British parliamentary democracy.
Now, you have two main parties, the Conservatives and the Labour, but you also have Liberal Democrats who are not quite so big, but are increasing their numbers of members of Parliament. They have consistently done so over the last few years. How do you think that whether your relationship, many people say that if there was a situation in the future, in this coming election, there may be a hung Parliament, that the Liberal Democrats may sort of become more important. Do you think that there's any chance of that happening?
I actually think that what will happen next time is that the Liberal Democrats will lose seats. They've got about 50 now. I think they'll go down to perhaps half that number. And that we will have enough to govern without needing to coalesce, to ally with anybody else. I mean, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when the Labour Party was just struggling to survive, people used to call the Liberals a Labour-saving device, because they tended to link themselves with the Labour Party rather than us. And our preference is always to govern clearly with one party winning clearly at the general election, and our electoral system tends to give that opportunity to the voters.
One of the most prolific leaders that British politics has had has been from your party, Margaret Thatcher. People still remember her. The Thatcherite views are still very much, in the discussion. Do you think Mr. David Cameron has the charisma and the ability to sort of emulate that leadership style?
Well, she was the first woman, so there was a distinctive characteristic there, which of course he cannot emulate. And times are different. She came in at a time when we similarly had economic difficulty, but the Labour Party was very left-wing, and she mapped out the importance of enterprise and low taxes. And in other words, there was a clearer ideological difference. Now, that ideological condition isn't the same now. But in terms of the charisma and the determination and the leadership qualities, yes, David Cameron has all those things.
Right. Coming towards Pakistan, and we talked in the beginning of the program about your historic relations or connections, I would say, with Pakistan. You've seen the country moving towards democracy. We have dictatorships, sporadically coming in. How have you seen this journey that we've had? We've lost Benazir Bhutto. You've got now Mr. Nawaz Sharif and President Zardari and Prime Minister Gilani working together with the other parties. How do you see this dispensation as it is at present?
I was a friend of Benazir for 31 years, and I thought that she was probably the best hope for a transition to democratic government after General Musharraf. But then, sadly, she was killed. I think Asif Ali Zardari has really slipped into the position with great effort and a lot of distinction. But in terms of how I characterize Pakistan, I think in a way it's simple. There has been, ever since its foundation, a difficult tension between authority and democracy. On the one hand, to get the authority and the stability, in comes the army. But to get the freedom and the proper politics, in comes democracy. And I think that, the challenge, particularly at a difficult economic time and with conflict in Afghanistan and with unrest within Pakistan, to get the authority out of democracy is the challenge. And whether that is doable or not remains to be seen.
Yeah, close to 2 years now. How do you see the